right, we are rolling live here. Stefan Maya with you, addedsouls.com. Man, what's going on? You doing all right? Doing okay? I think we are Friday. Friday's a good day, isn't it? I think so. Leading into the weekend, that kind of good stuff. We're going to talk about firearms license. I want to share a bit with you my experience this week as I took some classes. And in order to receive my PAL, something we have over here in Canada, the PAL license allows you to have the non-restricted firearms for hunting. But as a Christian, I'm also going to speak to you about self-defense and what kind of part that plays in our worldview, in our faith, our walk in this life, and the things that pertain to that. So it's just, impromptu thoughts, hit the live button, want to share with you all what's going on, what happened, and the experience of it all, right? The experience of it all. Consider, my dear friends, to subscribe, like, follow, share, hit the notification bell, all that kind of good stuff, right? Helps the material reach further and farther. People out there, just like you and I, may be interested in this kind of information. I know it is a hot topic at all times, quite quote-unquote controversial when we speak about self-defense, the right to bear arms, and to utilize it in branches of violence, if you will, for the purpose of self-defense, self-preservation, and what does that mean? What does that look like? And is it permitted? Is it authorized? Things like that. So the first session, the first chapter of this session is going to be in regards to my experience in class, the things we learned, the things that are necessary if you find yourself a Canadian and you want to have at your disposal firearms for hunting and things like that. So, and the second part of the session, I want to talk about self-defense as a Christian. Where does that come from? Do we receive our right to self-defense by the government standards and measurement, or does it come from a higher power? Stuff like that. It's real good to have all of you here. Truly a pleasure. Hopefully something of substance or of challenge will pierce our thoughts as we move along, or perhaps educational to some point, if you are seeking to move forward with this path. So I was wanting to purchase firearms, shotguns, rifles, legally, meaning I want to go to wherever there are various outlets in Canada where you can purchase firearms for hunting, sport, shooting, or just collection. And could be like Bass Pro Shop, right? And I wanted to go there, and I want to be able to purchase firearms. Well, you can't do that in Canada unless you have yourself a PAL, and PAL stands for something. It's possession and acquisition, something along those lines, which again means the government, the federal level, has said, yep, this individual has this card and is now legally capable of purchasing firearms for hunting purposes or sport, shooting, or collecting. And so I wanted that. I mean, I grew up, of course, in a strange era, right? Old school, old stock Canadian style and tradition. We grew up, everyone had firearms, we hunted, it was just part of life. Now in my household, my immediate household, mom and dad did not have firearms, but everybody else in the community did, or almost everyone else did. So, I went out hunting with friends and uncles and aunts and cousins and stuff like that, and it's just part of life. But with time, of course, many incidents take place, many foolish people doing foolish things with firearms, and the government growing bigger and bigger and bigger by the hour at every turn seeks to create a policy to enforce regulating the foolish acts from foolish people doing foolish things with firearms, leading us to now this current age where you have to receive this license in order to purchase the firearms. And this license, in order for one to acquire it, to receive it, must go through training, must go through a class. So you have to go online and set yourself up, calendared, to an open position where you can go to class. It has been extremely filled these years. I mean, everyone wants the PAL over here in Canada, it seems. Everyone wants to hunt, I suppose. That must be the reason, right? Everybody wants to start hunting. Well, so the classes are full, and I think, put in my request several months ago to find a calendar date, and it came, and it was this week, and I've been in class this week. It was 3 nights, 2 nights from 6 to 10. But I went there at 5 in order to have some time with the firearms. They have all kinds of firearms there on display on the tables that are, of course, rendered inoperable and with dummy ammunition, stuff like that. So you can just get the mechanics of it, the visual. So from 5 to 10 p.m. at night, but by the time you make it home, it's about 10:30 or 11. So that was Tuesday, Wednesday, and then last night I went there for testing. You have a written test and you have a practical test where an instructor brings you in a room, and there are several firearms there in which you are instructed to utilize and know about various. It's all about safety. Knowing the mechanisms, knowing the firearm in various situations, whether it be out hunting or at the range, and being able to do that properly. Anyways, so I went there, and I'll be honest, I thought for sure I was going to fail because there's so much information. Well, here, let me give you. You got to purchase a book, right? It's $10.50. Keeps going up every other month or year, I suppose, but $10.50. You got to purchase this, the Canadian Firearm Safety Course. And within this, you have all the information, various modules that explain all kinds of firearms and safeties. Okay? You got to pay for the class. You got to pay for the course. You got to pay for the book. And then you got to pay for if you pass, you got to pay for your card, your PAL card. You got to pay for everything. It's a it's a government tax grab, if you want to put it there. But so it costs a whole bunch of money. You got to go through all this time in class. Some of it, of course, to many people, it's redundant. It's like, yeah, I grew up with a gun in my hands, hunting. Like, I know all about this stuff. For others of us, of course, it's a bit of a learning curve. We're like, woof, man, there's so much information I didn't think was necessary to know. So, a bit of that challenge was there, no doubt. And what's interesting is I lived stateside, and the firearms I was blessed to operate with friends are all prohibited over here. You can't use them over here. They're illegal, unless you're a criminal, of course. If you're a criminal, well, you can have all the guns you want to and use them at everywhere and anytime. But for us law-abiding citizens, we can only have certain firearms, which brings me to the point. You have three sections three sections of firearm permission, which is non-restricted, your rifles and shotguns, your hunting firearms, and you have the restricteds, handgun stuff, things along those lines, and then you have the prohibited firearms, AR-15 kind of stuff. So my experience was not. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been out hunting with, 20 years, maybe more. I don't know, 30. So the firearms, of course, I had to get schooled on again, and it was a lot of information to pile into my brain at that. So I was like, I'm gonna fail. I didn't fail. I passed, and I got the certificate. I passed the practical 100%. 100% on the practical, and I think I got 94 on the written. And I had three of the questions wrong, and of course, it's kind of one of those things. You're a bit nervous. You're not thinking of the right context the question is seeking, and so you get it wrong. But a 94 is a pass. You have to get out of the 50 questions, you have to have 40 of them right. You have to have a minimum of 80% correct if you are going to pass. And with your practical, it's the same. You have to have at least 80% of your practical test to pass. I got 100%. That made me happy. I felt a bit accomplished, if you will. It was like, oh, cool. I wasn't expecting that, And the instructors were knowledgeable. There was about 3 or 4 of them I met. Some of them quite kind. Maybe one of them a bit more brash, if you will, or I don't know, whatever. But they knew their stuff, and they were They did what they were supposed to do. And they said, one of them said, those of you who are going to fail are those of you who think they know it all. The pride, which is interesting because it's the same in a great many fields, isn't it? Pride tends to blind you, and you tend to fail in life and whatever you're trying to accomplish if pride's in the way. And but most graduate. They want you to graduate. They want you to pass. That's the idea. They want you to get your license. So they do what they need to do to help you. In any given class, you may have 1 or 2, maybe 3 students that don't pass. They need to take it again. You need to pay for it all over again. And if you fail your practical but pass your written, don't matter. You fail. If you vice versa, the same thing. You have to pass both with an 80% mark. And that was accomplished, and I was very happy about that. A lot of information to know within that time frame, and it all boils down to safety. Really, everything boils down to safety. That's the whole shtick is safety, 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 safety. So you go through, and the instructors share all sorts of illustrations from foolish things that were done that caused people their limbs or their life. And so now we have these very strict laws because people are doing foolish things with firearms, and the rest of us are penalized with all sorts of bureaucratic red tape and enforced policies. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of this stuff that is most useful and I think necessary for an individual to know if he's going to operate a firearm. If the knowledge has not been passed to you by grandpa or dad or whatever, then yeah, I think you should go take a class on how to utilize firearms properly and be safe with it. I mean, for me, it's the sense we all have in common when you are operating a tool that can harm someone or even take someone's life. You have to kind of know how to operate the thing. It's like driving a car. You're not going to drive a car if you don't know how to first been trained in driving a car. So you go to safe locations with an instructor and you drive the car and you're told what things do and how they operate to be safe. It's the same thing with a firearm. The firearm ain't going to do absolutely nothing until it's put in the hands of an individual. And if the individual is using it foolishly, then foolish things are going to happen. You're going to win that prize. You're going to win that prize. Here's your sign. You win. Well, that's why it's important, I think, to certainly take courses or be trained in safety when it comes to utilizing this tool. And so you have a lot of the things that's why they created what is called the Axe and Approve, and the Axe and Prove system. Let me put it up on the screen here real quick so you can see what I'm talking about here. There it is. The Axe and Prove method of firearm safety, okay, given, of course, by law enforcement, driven by federal policy. During the Canadian Firearm Safety course or courses, the following method is used to reinforce safe gun handling. Every time someone picks up or loads a gun, he or she will be expected to perform Axe and Prove. Students are trained to perform Axe and Prove on hinge, bolt, pump, lever, and semi-automatic action long guns in the CFSC and on semi-automatic pistols, as well as a single and double action revolvers in the CRFSC. And the vital 4 acts of firearm safety, which I memorized, is assume every firearm is loaded, control the muzzle direction at all times, trigger finger must be kept off the trigger and out of the trigger guard, and see that the firearm is unloaded. How so? By proving it safe. How do you prove it safe? Point the firearm in the safest available direction, remove all cartridges, observe the chamber, verify the feeding path, examine the bore. And that is indeed what I had to do in the practical tests when I got in there, and we were tested on 3 firearms: the pump action, the hinge or break action, and the bolt action. And within these 3, the instructor would be like, okay, pick it up. And I verbally went through the process of the Axe and Prove to not only pass, but to memorize it myself, as I had been doing this week. Okay, I'm assuming this firearm is loaded. So I'm controlling the muzzle direction in a safe direction at all times. And I'm making sure that my trigger finger is not on the trigger nor within the trigger guard. Okay, because I need to see if it is safe by proving it safe. How do I prove it safe? I point the firearm always towards a safe direction. I remove any ammunition that might be found in there, whether, again, be the hinge, the bolt, or the pump. And from there, I can observe the chamber, I can verify the feeding path, and therein examine the bore for any obstructions. You take yourself a cleaning rod, you stick it in there, it goes straight to the chamber, you can see it, okay, no obstructions, cool. This weapon is now, or this firearm is now cleared, it's safe. And then they teach you the process of scenario. They teach you, okay, where do you find the proper ammunition? Well, you look on the barrel or at various other locations on the firearm where it's usually on the barrel, where it gives you the data stamp. The data stamp will tell you 12 gauge, this, that, and the other, whatever. It tells you. And then you have to discern the ammunition that's on the table, which one is the proper one for indeed. Because if you're talking about the pump, you're going to have yourself some different ammunition than if you're looking at the bolt, okay, or lever, things like that. So you kind of have to know that stuff. And that's what you're learning. You're learning about not pointing the barrel towards anyone at all times and stuff like that, right? So it's a safety course, and you have to go through this in order to receive your PAL. Your PAL is a card that comes in allowing you to go purchase firearms. And they don't only train you out there hunting or on the range, they train you in the household where it's supposed to be. Again, the laws are very, very strict, and there's all sorts of them. You have to have your firearms, and if you have them in the house, they have to be in a secure location, a safe, a vault, a place where it can be locked, and there cannot be any ammunition with it. There has to be a lock on the trigger. There has to be a lock on this, that, and the other. It's just, a bit overwhelming at first. You're like, good grief, how am I going to get this done? Well, it comes and it goes, and you pass. So now that I've passed my PAL, I've gone through the course, and I got my certificate. Now I have to go online or do the snail mail and fill out documents. I send it to the government. The government says, no, you're not going to get it. Then I don't get it. Then if they say, yeah, you know what, you qualify, you've not got any criminal activity in your in your dossier or whatever, the parameters they look at and say, yeah, okay, you can have your PAL. So then I wait 3 to 6 months until I get my PAL in the mail. And when I get my PAL, that's my little card that says, hey, there it is. Now I can go to the gun shop, gun store, whatever, and purchase firearms. So that was my experience. That's a quick thing. Do I agree with everything? Absolutely not. Were there things that were, in my opinion, hyper, how should I say it? Things that just were nonsensical to me? Yeah, but, keep your mouth shut and just get the course done. Well, little things. We must always, it's drilled into your mind, militantly. It's drilled into your mind, every firearm, assume that it is loaded. That's part of safety, and I agree with that. But if you look at the hypocrisy of a great many policies we have in our country now, governed by individuals who never even held a firearm, in my opinion, it starts to break down. It makes no sense. And at no time, by the way, were we speaking about self-defense. That's not a thing. You're not allowed to protect yourselves against the law, right? You can't practice self-defense. Well, it's against the law. I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek, I suppose. You can, but there's a lot of stuff going on. Most certainly with these crazy policies we currently have. So you have to assume that every firearm is loaded. So what happens if an intruder comes in at 3 a.m. and he's kicking your door down? And you see that he has a firearm. You have to assume, you would assume, right, that it's loaded. But not in that scenario. No, you have to assume that it isn't, and that he's just there to break down the door and take stuff from you. Let him do it, and then let him go away. And a few of the instructors kind of flippantly said some of these things, like, oh, if he points the gun, just assume it's loaded or whatnot, just give him his stuff. In my mind, I'm saying, no, if he's approaching me with a firearm, I'm going to assume it's loaded, and I'm going to have to very self-controlled, just defend my being, my person. I don't know if this person, So there's that big question, which bleeds us into, of course, the self-defense and Christians. Are Christians permitted to practice self-defense? Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt, yes. The principle, the nature of the source in which Christians go to for their faith, the Bible, the 27 books of the New Testament, along with the nature of God, recognized that we should learn and know about within the 39 books of the Old, yeah, there's no doubt about that. You can practice self-defense as a Christian. However, there's a pendulum we should not swing. We have to be balanced with that. We have to be reasonable. We cannot be trigger-happy, bloodlusting Christians that are just seeking for a reason to kill someone. Well, no, absolutely not. Nor are we with the pendulum swing within the very, how should I say, misguided and militant pacifism and pacifist. There may be some branches of pacifism that I might have conversation with, but most of them are quite militant in their mannerisms. They speak very foolishly, and they have a great many misguided thoughts. They're blinded by their pride, and a great many times they chirp in with this kind of self-indignant, self-righteous, pearl-clutching, virtue signaling, projecting, gaslighting, all these head science terminologies. They do that. And that's where, the pendulum has swung way too far for this individual into the liberal realm, if you will. Almost a disorder of sorts at times, where they think Jesus would have them welcome physical assault or being murdered, them and their loved ones in the house because, well, Jesus. Oh, no, absolutely not. That's foolishness of the highest order, and it's misguided, and these people are part of the problem why criminals and crime is rampant. They pluck out verses out of their context, turn the other cheek, love your enemies, pray for your enemies, things like that. They take that kind of those verses out of their context completely, and they apply it to their loyalties, their political affiliations and loyalties to pacifism, and not pacifism in a righteous department, but in an unrighteous department, in a very misguided and foolish location, where they now defend more so the criminal and the crime than they do their own brethren, extinguishing the crime and the threat. So, to the firearms licensing, it's again for the through the government's branches. It's for hunting, it's for sport, it's for collection. Well, the department that we don't speak about as much, that was a common understood thing, was self-defense. Because again, the government don't want you practicing self-defense. So, matter of fact, the government over in Ontario wants you to leave your car keys at the door so that the criminals won't go in and hurt you. They'll just take your car keys and drive off. Like, that's the solution. Give the criminals what they want. That's the solution. So, in my on my Facebook profile, I shared a post a few days ago, several days ago now, probably. I shared a post that said, because we're going to get into the conversation of Christians and self-defense. I just wanted to share my experience receiving my PAL licensing and the classes you have to go through. For any Canadians that might be watching, you have to go through that stuff. And I encourage you to do that if you want to have the legal condition, accomplished. But here in self-defense, in the realm of self-defense, let's talk about that. So I posted something on my Facebook profile several days ago, and it said something along the lines of, Jesus will teach you that your life is more important than my property. Jesus will teach us that. In principle, Jesus teaches us that. Property is of less importance than human life. So why risk your human life in order to thieve someone's property? Now, that's a very basic, very logical, sound, reasonable a truth. But if the pendulum is swung too far on one side or the other, you're going to find yourself in the dishes. And sadly, that's what happens. You have the individual who's just, again, trigger happy and bloodlusting. So he's going to create scenarios where he lures in the criminal in order to extinguish life. And I don't know, that might cause some danger for you eternally. God is the judge. He is the power and authority to condemn. From what I can read in the scriptures, I think that would be a problem for you if that is the motive of your heart, that you are purposely just driven with this agenda to harm people just to use your firearm or whatnot, or have a bloodlust against these foolish individuals who practice crime, I think that's a bit too far. Well, it is. Or the other way around, where they invoke and invite, on the pendulum swing totally on the other end, where they promote and encourage criminal activity because, well, turn the other cheek. A verse plucked out of its context, utilized for... And therein, of course, this endorses criminal activity and promotes it and allows it to flourish. When crime is not punished, there is no consequence to crime, crime is going to flourish. That is pretty basic. You land somewhere in the middle when it comes to scriptural authority and permission for self-defense, which is you don't want to hurt anyone ever. That's not the idea whatsoever. You don't look for that. But we do put the beware of dog sign on the window, don't we? Or on the property. Why? So that if any criminal chooses to have a foolish thought entering our property in order to harm us, there's going to be consequences. There's a reason we have the beware of dog sign. Nothing on this property, the sovereignty of of human life, me, my wife, my children. You don't need to meet Jesus today if you choose to withdraw yourself from a criminal activity. There has to be consequence. If you break into my door, I speak in personal term now, to each his case and context, but let's say here on my property with my family, mom and dad, wife, kids, everything here, you choose to begin to want to break my door down. I automatically will assume that you are doing so in order with the intent to harm. I will utilize everything at my disposal to extinguish that harm. Now, if it can be done without removing human life, then I will do so. I will not purposely seek to remove human life from this earth just because. No, I will certainly govern my mind to recognize and discern. Now, you don't have a lot of time to, some people are foolishly blinded by that and think, oh, you're going to have time to sit down and relax and think about this. No, you have to count the cost before and utilize precaution, because when that moment comes, we're talking about seconds, how you react. But within those seconds, with a trained mind, you can see, okay, this is a threat to life, or this is just a threat for property. If you're on my property and I see you trying to steal something, because of the country I live in and because of the laws I know exist and are enforced, I'm not going to go out there and start shooting at you. I will immediately call the police and say, somebody's on my property right now, and I'm recording him actually on the video, stealing my property. Now, sadly, not much will probably be done. That's the kind of country we live in now. But no human life is extinguished. Now, if you live in a country where the law says you can extinguish a human life for someone on your property trying to steal something that's on your property, like just materialistic things, all right, a lawnmower or whatever, you name it, and you are permitted to, well, I take the position to each his own conscience with that. To each his own conscience. You have to meet God on your own term, independently, accountable to him. If you deem the situation, it's legal in your country to do so, and you see the situation and you act upon it with deadly force, then hey, I'm not going to judge you. It's okay. But in the location I am at, it would be quite prudent for me to not extinguish someone's life at that stage. But at any time, if you are trying to enter my household, now if you're on my property trying to steal something, okay. But if you are trying to break down my door, if you are seeking to infiltrate my household, I will not think twice, because I've already thought about it. I don't need to debate it in my mind while it's happening. I've already counted this cost. This moment has already been generated in my mind. You will meet Jesus. It's an objective, absolute reality. And afterwards, we'll deal with all the government and the law and the courts and all that and the lawyers and all that afterwards. I'm going to make sure that I wake up with my wife, my parents, my children, safe. And I'm not going to start debating if you're in there to steal the TV or not. Immediately. As we were trained in class, you have to assume the firearm is loaded. I'm going to assume you're coming in here and seeking to harm human life, innocent human life. And so I will extinguish yours. I don't want to do that. I'm not speaking with pride. I'm speaking as a matter of fact. I don't want to do that, but I will. Do not try to break in my house. I will assume you are seeking to extinguish human life, and I will recognize that you will have withdrawn yourself from the right to your human life. You will meet Jesus. And I dare say, meeting Jesus in those circumstances, trying to steal or hurt someone inside a house, inside their home, it ain't going to work out well for you, I think, if you meet Jesus that way. Don't meet Jesus that way. You don't need to. Again, to the post. Your life is more important than the stuff I have. Or, listen, really, think about it. Now, I know that the criminals that have flourished in this country because our corrupt governing policies have promoted them, I know that it has birthed a great many criminals thinking nothing's going to happen to me if I break in this person's house. Because nothing has been happening, has it? Us rural folk, us old stock Canadians that our current corrupt government hates to no end, we will send you to Jesus. This is not tough talk. This is a matter of fact. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. Which is why I'm going to have this big sign. Okay, it's going to say, nothing on this property is worth your life. I'll do everything I can to preserve your life. But that the minute you try to infiltrate my household, that's it. Now, Christians, believers who have swung the pendulum too far on the left, immediately are triggered at this point, and they want to chime in with their pearl-clutching, self-righteous, virtue-signaling pestilence. I had to block someone the other day. I have to block these types on social media all the time. They're unreasonable when it comes to that. They may be very kind and knowledgeable on a great many other fields of Christian faith, but when it comes here, for some reason, they've got this misguided disorder about it. Scripturally speaking, there is principle, and there is all sorts of it in the Bible, teaching us the authority to practice self-defense. God himself in his nature is one who is just and has practiced time and time again capital punishment. Okay? It is a just measurement of justice. Now, God, of course, is all-knowing, and he is all-good. So he can judge with more accuracy than at most times we do. Granted. But not to the point where we are so blind that we cannot discern a threat from a non-threat. Okay? We can. We certainly can. If someone is trying to break down your house, in your home at 3 a.m., and you see him wielding weaponry, and he may be even screaming belligerently, or something is disorderly with his conduct, his behavior, his countenance, I mean, he's not there to ask you for help or anything. He's not there to, you can discern this. One Bible verse one Bible verse from all of the verses that in nature give us permission. And here's here's a bit of a sidestep to that, but a bit of an excursion, I should say. A corrupt government doesn't want you to believe in a higher power. Most specifically, Christianity, in Christ, in Jesus. And they know why they don't want you to believe anymore in Jesus, in a higher power, the God of the Bible. And this is the reason, because the God of the Bible is the source in which we are authorized to practice self-defense. And so the government wants to remove your faith in God so that you bow down to the tyranny of a corrupt government. And a corrupt government is going to remove your right to self-defense. So the corrupt powers and tyrannies and dictators and the commies, they have the weapons. They have the firearms. But the peasants being slaughtered, being pushed into hard labor, they don't anymore. They'll tell you it's all about safety and safety and safety. But I assure you, as an individual living in a fallen nation, The only safe individuals around here are the criminals. And we law-abiding folks, not so much. Again, this is why they want to extinguish Christianity. Bit of an excursion, to the point. We do not receive our permission to self-defense from the government. It comes directly from a higher power. It does. And we read about that in the Bible. With all love and respect, my dear friends, it is simply an objective, absolute truth. So one Bible verse out of so many. One Bible verse out of so many. Found in, where is it now? Okay, 1 Timothy 5:8. Okay, 1 Timothy 5:8, I quote, it says, "But if any provide not for his own home, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith." The faith here in 1 Timothy 5:8 is the system of the gospel. You've denied it. If you are not providing for your own, your family, and for those in your own household, the immediate family, your wife, your children, mom, dad, he had denied the faith. You've denied the system of the gospel as legal citizens of his kingdom within the boundaries of his law. We've denied that, and is worse than an unbeliever, an infidel, an unbeliever. Do unbelievers go to heaven? Well, if you believe what the words of the Bible say, no. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever should believe in him should not die, but have eternal life. Don't need to perish. Don't need to be eternally condemned. You can go to heaven in peace with God forever. You can do that. That's available to you if you believe in Jesus. But if you don't believe, you got problems. You got problems. Well, this verse, and I know this verse, I've studied this verse. I'm already thinking of the misguided and foolish arguments that come when the pendulum is swung too far on the left. Yeah, well, that context, I know the context. I've studied the context. I know exactly what was being said here and why it was being said and to who it was being said. I'm speaking of the principle that is found therein. The principle that is found therein gives permission for self-defense, in my honest opinion. How so? Well, okay. Let's say you have a widow. The widow is a widow indeed and cannot provide for herself anymore. She can't pay the grocery or the rent. It is, and she has no, again, she is a widow indeed. She has no family or anything along the line or employment that would have given her, financial stability. She has none of these things. She is alone. It is the duty and the wonderful blessing and task of the local assembly, the local church that belongs to Christ, to take care of her. Not as a burden, but as a blessing. We want to help this widow, our dear sister or brother. We'll pay the rent. We'll help you with groceries. We'll help you with a place to live. Okay? Now I want you to reason with me. Why is it that God would put that as a salvation issue? Meaning, if you are not taking care of family, immediate and outside, that it is seen as a hostile denial of the faith, and you are worse than an unbeliever. Meaning, you've condemned yourself, literally, spiritually. That's how important it is. Okay, so if that measurement of justice from God in the penmanship of the Holy Spirit, here Paul to Timothy, speaks this, there's a principle there, and there's reasoning to be had. Really, there is. Why would God say, or God's nature, you must feed the widow indeed. You must financially help the widow indeed. Food, shelter, clothing. But her human life, her sovereignty, her being, nah. You can allow any criminal to murder him or her. Yeah, that don't matter. That's fine. Turn to the other cheek. Love your enemies, right? Verses plucked out of context to satisfy the misguided thoughts of a liberal mind. Their loyalty to political affiliations, typically always on the left-leaning corruption. Reason with me. God's nature is saying this is a matter of salvation. You can lose your soul if you are not providing for mom and dad, for a widow, for family. Indeed, that are in need, indeed. It is legitimate. They are honest, sincere. They need your help, food, shelter, clothing. If you don't provide for them, you're lost. You're worse than an unbeliever. But you can go ahead and murder them, though. You can go ahead and allow the heathen or the criminal mind to just, physically assault them and murder them. That's fine. But you better make sure you feed them, though. Give them food. What use will the food be to nourish their bodies? Their body's been shot dead. No, my dear friends. 1 Timothy 5:8 is one verse out of so many in the Bible that produce God's nature and the authority and permissibility and the permission we have as Christians to self-defense. If I'm going to provide for his own household, that, in logical format, must include physical life. And why are we seeking to preserve physical life? For the gospel. For the gospel. What use is it if we allow ourselves and invoke ourselves to be extinguished? We lose that extra day we could have been on the earth proclaiming the good news of Christ. Well, what about the criminal? See, there you go. You're defending the criminal now. The criminal chose to withdraw himself from his life when he chose to remove yours. God knows that. God knows that. What about church discipline? Real quick, we're not getting into that. That's not the theme here, but church discipline as a bit of an excursion with the principle, the point. If church discipline is not practiced in the local assembly, what's going to happen? It's going to flourish delinquency. It's going to flourish delinquency and lawlessness, and it's going to contaminate everyone until the congregation loses its light and is corrupt and no longer belongs to God. Why are we governed by the Holy Spirit to practice church discipline? To keep it pure, to keep it safe. Why am I practicing safety and security and defense in my household? My life, my wife's life, my children, my parents. I'm providing for my own and for those in my household. Not only food, shelter, and clothing, but bodily safety. If you try to break into my door at 3 a.m., could be 3 p.m., don't matter. You will meet Jesus, and you will meet him on terms you don't want to meet him on. This is such a simple concept to have. I fail to recognize, I can understand if you have just converted to Jesus and you are ignorant on a great many things. I was there. Truly. Back in 2011, I wasn't sure. Because, again, maybe I was taking verses out of context. Turn the other cheek must mean we should allow criminals to hurt us somehow. It doesn't. He's speaking about retaliation, revenge. He's talking about if your brother steals $5 from you today, don't bitter yourself and steal 100 from him next week. Okay? Love your enemies? Do you think that loving your enemies means allow them to continue in their delinquency and their and murderous ways? Like, do you really? Well, of course not. Loving them, being kind to them, praying for them is towards the direction of their repentance and change. Why do we discipline our children? Is it because we don't love them? Why is this so foreign of a thought to individuals? Because, again, their pride's in the way, and their self-righteous indignation is loyalist to their political affiliations, which is, again, usually on the left-leaning lunacy. And some of these brethren are straight up and well-versed when it comes to everything else, but you speak about self-defense, they pull up this pacifist card. And I may even have some like-minded thoughts and judgments with some pacifism. But my experience has been quite the opposite. These are militant in their lunacy. They invite criminal activity and they promote it and they defend it more so than siding with their own brethren. And I find that's very sad. any balanced-minded Christian, and I know I have so much more to learn. I'm no bastion of scholarly writ or theological pathogen here. I'm just your common folk, blue-collar guy, son of a factory worker, just trying to make a living the best I can for God. And if I can get this, man, you can get this. This is very balanced. Don't be trigger happy. Don't bloodlust. Don't be seeking to hurt people purposely to prove the point you use. Nor do you allow criminal activity to continue. Murderers to continue. Our right to self-defense is from a higher power. If it's not with firearms, it can be with anything and everything. That makes sense. Which brings me to, again, the foolishness of a corrupt government and its enforcement upon law-abiding people wanting firearms. We have to assume that every firearm is loaded until a criminal comes to your door with a firearm. Then you have to assume it isn't, and he's not really there to hurt you. Well, just like all the Old Testament believers in God and New Testament believers in God, we fear God more than man. And when the government says something that violates our given rights that come from a divine source, then we don't obey the government. The government told Daniel he was not allowed to worship God. Daniel stopped worshiping God because the government said so. No. Government says you're not allowed to protect your own human life. We're going to believe the government. We're going to fall down and bow down to the government. Almighty government. Yes, I suppose you know best. You want us all safe, so you're going to tell me I'm not allowed to practice self-defense? Well, no. In a fallen nation governed by corrupt bureaucrats and corporations, and they defend and secure the criminal activity more than the law-abiding, upright integrity of its citizenry. Do we bow down to that? Absolutely not. And they hate us for it. Why do you think they're extinguishing us? They hate us for it. They don't want us to believe in Jesus because they know these crazy Christians who believe in Jesus, they're going to defend themselves. They're going to cling hard to their Bible and to their firearms. We can't have that. We got to get rid of that. And they've slowly eroded and contaminated so many of us that we now think and believe this nonsense. Oh, yeah, here, big government, please take all our firearms because, well, you're protecting us. No, listen. I'm in a location that if a criminal is seeking to murder me or harm our household, I'm going to call the police officer. They'll be here in 45 minutes. You and I know in 45 minutes we'd all be slaughtered. I don't have 45 minutes. If our prime minister, his corrupted cabinet, and all of them have an entourage of firearms all around them protecting them, then I have the right, in logical format, in argument. Why is his life more important than mine? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why his life is more important than mine. If you are an individual who doesn't believe in God, he becomes God. And if he is God, then he must be protected. See, we aren't God, he is. The minute we extinguish the thought that there is not a higher power, specifically the God of the Bible, you extinguish the Bible, the book he wrote, and God out of our existence, then who among us becomes God? Well, it must be the prime minister then. The prime minister is corrupt. Doesn't matter. He's God. He's the tyrant. He's the dictator. What he says goes. That's why they hate us, because we know that our prime minister or president or king or queens on this earth are not God. We don't bow down to them. We honor the office. We pray for them. We pay our taxes. But no, we don't bow down to their corrupt ways. Our self-defense comes from a higher power. That's it. That's it. And brethren who are against that are part of the problem. Let me put it this way. You're one of those brethren, right? Pacifist. You pluck out verses out of their context, turn the other cheek, love your enemies, and you apply that misguidingly, and you promote criminal activity. Whether you want to admit it or not, you do. And you embolden criminal activity. to the point that they think they can get away with anything. And then they come knocking on our door, those of us who know the permission we have to self-defense. And we make them meet Jesus. You participated in that. You emboldened him to that point. You're guilty. Didn't think of that, did you? Connect the dots. You're part of the problem. If you'd be on the side of justice and what is right, and it would extinguish the criminal's mind to want to practice something that might get him shot. You have a sign on your door that says, "Beware of dog." Why do you have that there? Why do you have security cameras for? Friends, this is a matter of one just thinking. Just think. Use your mind. Read the scriptures. Recognize the principles. We are to be principled men. Balanced. Some of these brethren are so misguided. They'd rebuke God. You shouldn't have flooded the earth during the age of Noah. What about all those people that drowned? What if some of them would have obeyed the gospel? You see how foolish that sounds? That's what they do. That's how it sounds to them. I had to block an individual on my friend list the other day. I've been blocking these types for years. I posted on my Facebook, I said, "Nothing on my property is worth your life. Jesus will teach you that." And what do you think these kinds say? "Oh, so you believe that your property is more important than human life?" You know how nonsensical and foolish that is? You know how that provokes me and tempts me into just lashing out at the stupidity of it? You take a breath and say, these brethren are just lost. They're just lost with it. They don't understand what. Of course not. And I never said that. Again, pearl clutching, virtue signaling, nonsense, self-righteous hypocrisy. Of course, human life is always more important than property. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a criminal seeking to practice a criminal act that would threaten my household's life. Go tell that to God. Oh, God, you mean to tell me that the ark was more important than all the people's lives that drowned? How dare you, God? How dare you think that the ark was more important than the people who drowned? See how foolish that's that when you verbally express the illogical thoughts and arguments they have, that's where it lands. Makes no sense. Christians can practice self-defense. Matter of fact, they should. If you don't, you can still go to heaven, no doubt. But it's going to make things a bit more difficult for us on this earth. And in my opinion, stuff's already hard enough to deal with. You know, loss of loved ones, disease, natural disasters, everything else. There's enough. Persecution for standing up for the truth. Persecution. I mean, we deal with enough. Why add this one in there? Wake up. You're part of the problem. Repent. Change your mind. Practice self-defense. Stand up against evil. Expose it. Practice justice. These things are important, aren't they? I think so. Stefan Maya is my name. addedsouls.com is the website. I appreciate your kind attention. If you find any value or substance in this session, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing. Hit the notification bell so that way you get notified when we go live and you can join us. And share on all kinds of social media platforms. There may be others out there who would appreciate this kind of content and may agree or disagree, but can reason, right? Can reason with it. I labor alongside the East Coast Church of Christ over here on the East Coast of Canada. You can check out our .com, eastcoastchurchofchrist.com. We also have a Facebook page, East Coast Church of Christ. Very beautiful, wonderful, growing, faithful, healthy congregation. We'd love to have you part of it. Really. You're looking for a group of people who are like-minded in judgment, who stand fast on the Word of God, who love each other, and you can not only hear it from our lips, but you can see it in our actions. We love each other. You want to be part of a security system, a safe refuge? Come learn with us. Reach out to us, eastcoastchurchchrist.com. Send us an email. Love to have you. We'd love to have you. All right, friends. Till next time, stay focused and stay positive. And peace out.